Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels and short stories. And with me today is Sam West. We're going to be talking about the spell Mind Sliver. Sam, Mind Sliver. What are your initial thoughts?
I love this spell.
Yeah, I thought you liked this one. I like it too. You in your written review, you called it a evolution of vicious mockery, did you not?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So the general premise of vicious mockery is it is a supportive cantrip that is always good throughout the game. As far as if you don't want to upcast first level or higher spells, you can fall back on vicious mockery. And because disadvantage is just a static condition, it doesn't get better with age. It just one thing's gonna have disadvantage on attack roll, and it's always 2d20s. You always hit the lower. There's no additional modifiers or anything like that. It's just always good. It's the kind of effect that you don't mind having to cast at higher levels, and it supports your team, right? So you're protecting your frontline fighters, you're protecting the backline person, you're being silly. It very much embodies the bard class, I think, in a lot of ways. It's an iconic spell for that reason. While Mind Sliver, I think the fantasy of it's a little bit less iconic to me. This isn't something that it doesn't stand out as shouting profanity at Goblin until its head breaks, which is objectively funny and to many people, myself included. It is a supportive spell in that you care about what your teammates are doing when you cast it. You care about what everyone around you, like the circumstances that you're in the moment. And it does, basically you trade slightly more damage for slightly less common situations.
Let me stop you there, because you're the eloquent one, but I think I know what you're going to say, and I want to say it first. My thoughts on Mind Sliver. It's a little, all right, I love vicious mockery for the role-playing elements, talking shit about somebody's mother and their head explodes, like I said. But from a practicality standpoint, vicious mockery gives disadvantage on the target's next attack roll, whereas Mind Sliver gives disadvantage on their next saving throw, correct?
It's not even disadvantage. It's minus 1d4.
Minus 1d4, that's what it is. Yes.
Actually,
yeah, I guess disadvantage is better. Minus 1d4 isn't amazing. But the point I wanted to make is that it puts more of the power into you and your party, rather than, because with vicious mockery, if somebody knows they've been vicious mocked, they can choose to cast a spell or something rather than attack. You're putting the power in their hands, whereas in Mind Sliver, whatever disadvantage they're going to get to their next saving throw, that's up to you and the party to put them in a situation where they need to make a saving throw.
Yeah, that's a really great point. This is a proactive effect. Yeah, this is something that you yourself, it's not your teammates and you have to work together to get the most out of this. And what the enemy doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it matters less. It doesn't matter if they can choose to play around this, like they can choose to play around vicious mockery. They can't just decide if they fail the save. If they are if they fail the in save, they're just, the next save they make is going to be worse. There's nothing they can do about it. They can't choose not to attack like they can with vicious mockery. It is just better than that, as far as like setting things up.
When I said disadvantage is better than minus 1d4, you look like you were going to object.
It's not exclusively better than 1d4. So advantage and disadvantage as a mechanic is very complicated. It's more complicated than I think a lot of people necessarily realize. Oftentimes in online forum discussion, delving into good old D&D, right, as toxic successful as it is, it's often equated to like a +3, which is apt as you're looking at like the statistical differences in average results. What it also does, and what it does that varies quite a bit, is it changes the ceilings and floors of things that you're likely to receive. So if you're only ever succeeding on check on a 19 or 20, advantage is a massive upside over a +3, because it gives you two instances where your percentage of outcomes are just way better, right? Literally doubling your odds in a lot of circumstances, as opposed to just what a +3 is, which would be around +15%. Very different as far as that scope goes. It also, you have things like if only critical hits or only critical misses impact effects. But that's regardless. A D4 also stacks. And that's a much more interesting mechanic to me, because with disadvantage and advantage, if you have a protection fighter, for example, someone that's going to impose disadvantage on the next attack roll creature makes anyway, they can't get super disadvantage. There isn't, outside of the lucky feat, aren't mechanics that roll more than 2 d20s when it comes to advantage and disadvantage, which means there's a stacked cap that you can impose advantage or disadvantage on something. More instances of it negate advantage or negate disadvantage respectively, right? So if you can give something disadvantage twice to remove its advantage and impose disadvantage on it, but you can't have something have double disadvantage and receive further penalties. With Mind Sliver, you can stack this with disadvantage effects. If you can find a way to give something disadvantage on a saving throw, which a lot of conditions do, things like paralyzing, if you hold person something, which you want to be using with Mind Sliver anyway, because Mind Sliver cares about saver dies, it cares about those kinds of saving throws, the next effects that would be going on it, you can, if it's, or a whole person's about example, because paralyzed means they auto hit, something that restrains. So ensnaring strike we talked about recently. This means the disadvantage now scales with the D4. So if you really need something to fail a saving throw, you can compound these effects together, which makes it, in my opinion, much, much better than disadvantage. Because disadvantage and advantage is given out like candy in this game. D4 subtracted from things is very rare. You see them on like Bard's Cutting Words, which is a single subclass, right? You see this in very few and far between instances. Them making that mechanic and just saying, this can be a cantrip, you could just have additional effects like this, opens up to have more ability to maximize effectiveness, to really get into the nitty gritty and make as high likelihood as you can of success while still getting to roll dice, while still getting to do big splashy things. It is, I think it is majorly better than just imposing disadvantage, even if it's only on average 2.5 better, but like 2.5 and 3 are very close anyway. So it marginally, I think it is about as good numerically and way better as far as gameplay perspective as a mechanic.
All right, you just said a lot. What I came away with was, well, not necessarily better, but it's different. And the betterness comes with that advantage or disadvantage has, there's so many ways to get that the betterness comes from being able to stack on top of one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
It's about as good, but really crucially, there aren't other effects like it.
Yeah.
Things get worse. Like advantage, disadvantage is worse the more instances there are. Protection fighting style is worse if you have someone with vicious marker in the party. Just because you can't stack that on top of those things. One of those features isn't going to work while the other one is, right? This will stack with other effects. This will, and granted, there are less effects that are imposing disadvantage on saving throws. There are more of them in the game than there are Mind Sliver effects. And if there were multiple Mind Sliver effects, those still stack. If you 5 people Mind Sliver something and then one person holds person on it, they get minus 5d4 to that check.
Whoa. Multiple Mind Slivers stack?
Yes.
Is this true, or is
the target must succeed on an intelligence saving throw or take damage, and subtract 1d4 from the next save before the end of your next turn. So if before the end of if 5 people in a row Mind Sliver something, all of those effects are independent of each other. So you have until that player's next turn 1d4, until the following player's next turn 1d4, until the following player's next turn 1d4. And when that saving throw is made, from my understanding, I could be wrong, but from the way things are worded, I believe it will stack and subtract 5d4 from the saving throw. Granted, that's never going to happen realistically.
Yeah,
you are almost never
not
walking
gonna
the tables where that's going to
so
occur.
many people with Mind Sliver ready to go.
Oh,
and that's what they want to do. Yeah.
Hold on. Plus, Mind Sliver itself is a saving throw, so each one would just be adding the d4 to the other one. Never mind. Disregard that. We went through a bunch of hoops only to discover that this imposes the d4 on the subsequent one, so it doesn't matter.
All right.
Great. We talked in circles for 15 seconds.
Fun times.
Oh yeah.
All right. So when's your idea of an ideal time to cast Mind Sliver?
The ideal time to cast Mind Sliver is when you are preparing to cast a more crucial spell and you are in the low enough tiers that you know you're not going to get legendary resistance. You know you're not going to want to cast an upper level spell instead of this, or you've burned through enough of them and just need this to work. So those are often kind of the effects like Banishment, Hold Person, Polymorph. There are going to be a lot of effects that, like anything that, there's spells that shrunk people into extra dimensional spaces for eternity. When you need a saving throw to permanently stop a big bad, Mind Sliver empowers that in a meaningful way, especially whenever all the numbers are rising to very, very high accounts. Having an extra 1 to 4 subtracted from a result can be the difference between a campaign ending effect and a campaign continues onward. You need another 2 weeks to go try and track this thing down and kill it. Mind Sliver is going to be great in the lower tiers, like outside of the overscope, right? In the lower tiers, whenever you don't want your other party member, your non-sorcerer warlock wizard that you're journeying with, to not be able to hold person, to not be able to get the powerful saber die and waste the action on it. This empowers all of those. It makes it so that your friends have less feel bad moments. It also can be just the round before you cast a hold person, the round before you cast a dominate person, the round before you cast a hold monster. You can prep this with a Mind Sliver if you're running low on spell slots, and then you're more likely that's going to succeed. It's a setup spell that has a very good place in the game as far as reducing feels bad moments, because if you miss it, you can try anyway. If you feel like you're down to the wire, you have to use this. If you don't fail it, it can be a huge, meaningful, impactful way of not wasting resources and making them more likely to occur.
All right, now you talked about lower tier spells or lower tier uses. However, the lowest tier you mentioned was hold person. Now, what are we talking about?
Hold person's second level spell, so that's having a third level. Right? Third to fifth.
All right. That is yeah. But Mind Sliver is a cantrip though. What about down at the cantrip levels at level 1 characters? What
you can spam it, right? If no one else is forcing saves, this can be, because you cast it on your turn. If they fail the initial one and take the d6 damage, they subtract a d4 from the next one. So if you're this also notably goes outside of spells. So this also will work with your Monk Stunning Strikes. It'll work with your Barbarian Grappling.
Right.
It'll work
that's true.
Not grappling, but other features that care about saving throws. But worst case scenario, if you're in a situation where you are really tight on resources, you're playing longs form, 15 encounters before your next long rest, spamming Mind Sliver will make each subsequent success more likely. So once you get 1 down, you're adding basically a d4 to every single one you get for the rest of the time, so long as they keep hitting, which is decent, right? It makes it so the odds of nothing happening on your turn go down. As you know, I don't like doing nothing on my turn. So having the subsequent ways for things to empower that, to make it less likely that nothing occurs, I'm a big fan of. So like worst case scenario, spamming Mind Sliver is decent. You can also pair this with something like Vicious Mockery. If you really we need that to have a disadvantage on attack roll, Mind Sliver it with the Warlock, the Bard runs over and viciously mocks it, and then it doesn't one-shot the Paladin, and you're all go, huzzah, look at the teamwork, we did it. We did 1d4 plus 1d6 damage, and the Paladins lived. And that's the lowest possible tier we can talk about with this. But again, you also just have first level spells, right? Toss's Hideous Laughter, that making something prone and have disadvantage or a minus d4 on the saves, that will affect subsequent saves too. So if something is prone and you Mind Sliver it, that's laughing hysterically with Toss's Hideous Laughter, its subsequent save it's going to make at the end of its turn is going to subtract d4, which means you're likely to maintain Toss's Hideous Laughter, which can be very powerful.
What about we've discussed Mind Sliver versus Vicious Mockery and different effects you can impose on your enemies, but how do you feel that compares to rather than imposing negative effects on your enemies, similar cantrips that boost yourself and your allies, not guidance, because that's but
there's True Strike.
No, not True Strike. Can't wait. I still can't wait till we talk about that one though. But there's something though. There's got to be one
off the top of my head
boosts your saving throws, or no?
So there are a bunch of ones that,
or at least
only
in theory,
do single benefits that don't also do damage. What's the one you suggested?
No, I was saying something that boosts you and your allies' saving throws, or your chances to hit. Aid? No, aid just gives you.
Most of those don't come with damage.
Yeah, but I mean, the damage, like we said, isn't like amazing.
Sure, it's something that's it. The nice thing about it, right, is it does contribute to ending the encounter, especially early low level encounters. This can sometimes.
Yeah, but I mean, you spent 90% of this conversation so far talking about, well, if they don't have legendary resistance or whatnot, you're not talking about early encounters. You're talking about like using this at higher levels, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. Are there no comparable cantrips that like give your allies a boost, like to their chances to hit or their saving throws?
So nothing. The answer is not really. There
Oh.
are ways that you can use the conditional ones to impose situational advantages. So like Earth Tremor, making things difficult terrain, can set up instances where less dice or more dice are being rolled. You can have situations where guidance is giving an ability to check a d4 to make a grapple more likely, but that's far out from what is normally happening. The really first time you start seeing assisting allies is with stuff like Guiding Bolt, which is a first level spell, which is going to grant advantage on hits of a hit creature, which is fine. This is, I think, quite a bit better because it doesn't cost you a resource mainly. And because I think advantage on the attack roll, again, it's a feature that's common, and there isn't, the reason that I think I like to rave about this feature and rave about Vicious Mockery is they are fairly unique. Before Mind Sliver, Vicious Mockery was like the only real good supporting cantrip because it both contributed towards the end of the encounter, you did some amount of damage, regardless of if you rolled a 1 or a 4, you felt like you contributed towards killing the thing. If the thing is at 1, it can kill it, and that is better than just imposing disadvantage, right? On top of that, it also had a meaningful impact on the encounter and supported your teammates. That is what I ask for out of these cantrips, and it's hard to ask for more out of them, and that's what Mind Sliver does.
I was thinking about Bless, and that's a first level spell.
Yep.
Okay.
There aren't comparable effects really that are also contributing to ending the encounter, that are also doing some amount of damage. Because again, the difference between doing no damage and 1 damage is very high. It's the difference between being able to kill a creature and not being able to kill a creature. And while it may feel small, if you're looking at the lowest and low tiers, you're fighting sometimes things with 1 hit point, with 1 to 5 hit points, where something takes half of the Burning Hands damage, takes like 4-ish damage. 1 extra damage is going to kill the goblin that it wouldn't otherwise. Vicious Mockery can kill that goblin, right? It can make its head explode. Blade Ward never will. True Strike never will. It will always only do the buff effect. It will only always do the imposing status effects. Doing both is important, especially in the low tiers of play. And the upper tiers of play, it's less important, but it still contributes towards the end of the encounter, and it's still something that doesn't cost you a resource that is doing because the damage increases as you go. And this is notably higher damage increases than Vicious Mockery is. This is going d6s instead of d4s. You're scaling better. You're going to be doing some quantity of damage that may be enough to kill something. If you ever high roll and get a 12 at level 5, you're really happy with it. You're like, great, 2d6 damage could have killed it. It sometimes kills it. Even if it doesn't kill it, the next thing that's going to hit it is more likely to do some kind of effect to it that's going to drop it. It's more likely to get hit by the Burning Hands full effect. It's more likely to take the full effect of the Fireball. You're happy with that for most of the time, especially for something that is such a low cost.
All right. Yeah, I guess that's it. What's your Sam score on this one?
This is a 4 out of 5. I want to give this a 5 out of 5, but it isn't that powerful. It is nice. It is comfortable to have. This is a damage spell that a damage cantrip that if I liked the thematics more, I put on more characters. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the telekinesis mind character kind of stuff that it's going for, so it's not really for me, but I know a lot of people that love that kind of stuff, and the spell's mechanics are great. So 4 out of 5, easy peasy.
Yeah, I'd give it a 4 out of 5 too, but I've got no justification to take that star away. It
doesn't warp the game around it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to rethink about how you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. This isn't the best of the spell types that exist for it. It's very good. It'll go on a lot of sheets, but it's
because
not.
I do like that psychic damage thing, But yeah, 4 out of 5 sounds fair. All right, that was Mind Sliver. Thank you, Sam, for joining us, and thank you, listeners and watchers. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.